Well, hello again. It's been a little while. I was gone for about a week. I was sitting on a federal grand jury again, and I've got two more times where I have to do that out of an 18-month term, so I'm almost done with that. But anyway, this time I'm going to be talking about a topic that I have addressed before in the past. It's about how you can do things to address false allegations regarding your character. And, that's a topic that really ought to be commonly discussed because we definitely have a lot of people who are smear merchants out there who will just outright tell lies about us, right? So, in this case, I'm gonna start off talking about a political context for this because there are certain people out there who are denigrating a whole group of people, in this case student protesters, and saying, oh, they're all pro Hamas, they're all pro terrorist. And that sounds familiar. I had to deal with that back in the day. I'll talk about that a little bit further down the road here, but first I just want to note that the extremist leaders and allies of the country we are not supposed to criticize are attempting to normalize what is happening right now. The death toll climbing to tens of thousands, and that they're able to say that it's not a genocide. It's a happy system of causing death and destruction. I just saw today that they bombed a place that was designated as a safe zone. So these are the kinds of scumbags that we're dealing with here. And, what they'll do in terms of the protests is that they'll either manufacture talking points like just say what I just said, that, oh, they're all pro Hamas or whatever. But they'll also look at maybe some genuine examples of people acting badly, and then run with that like 1,000 miles, you know, and it really is something to look at these protests happening on campus, even though they might not be perfectly done, and think that those are worse than killing tens of thousands of people, including I don't remember the actual estimated amount, but a lot of those deaths have actually been children, right? But unfortunately for these extremist leaders and their allies, there is no way around having to deal with issues that arise from living in modern day conditions where communication takes place regularly and freely across borders and boundaries, and at different time zones and throughout humankind without borders and geographical barriers separating nations and regions, unlike in past centuries. So, what they have to resort to is lies, and again, acting as smear merchants. Sometimes, it's a little bit easier than other times. There can be gray areas, and they'll tell half truths or they will lie by omission. But they will definitely also work overtime to inject us with a strong dose of straight up lies, until maybe we OD and just stop paying attention altogether. So this is obviously nothing new. I remember when I was designated a pro Saddam and pro terrorist when I was opposed to the Iraq War. I haven't forgotten that. Apparently, some people have. Well, that's what dipshits aplenty were arguing then. They were, trying to make it sound like, I was holding Saddam Hussein's hand and walking with him, like strolling through the park with him, and maybe throwing breadcrumbs to the ducks or whatever the hell. That they were trying to make it seem like I was romantically inclined to snuggle up to Saddam, like brush his mustache, whisper sweet nothings to him, and all that kind of garbage. And that same empty-headed propaganda is basically going on now, obviously with a different cast of characters, But you've got this moral panicking against the protests because they have nothing to offer against those but smears to distract from the tens of thousands who have been killed and who probably will continue being killed, if they have their way. So I just have to say it. If you think all of these protesters are pro-Hamas, you're a dumb motherfucker. Why should I hold back on that? You are stupid if you think like all these people suddenly, practically overnight, have just waken up and said, you know what? I'm pro-Hamas now. No, they look at what is happening, what the country we're not supposed to criticize is doing, and they're saying, I don't want to know that my university is supporting that. I don't want my government to support that. I don't want the blood of tens of thousands of people on my hands. And then they're saying, look, withdraw support from these efforts. Whatever university they're attending, they don't want to feel like they're contributing to that. And you know what? If any place that I write for wants me to, not say this or wants to cancel me for taking this controversial stand, then I say go right on ahead. I don't want to write for such a place anyway. Okay? So if any one of those people's listening, like any website that I happen to contribute to, go ahead and hit that cancel button on me, because we're done. If you think I'm not going to criticize this country that we're not supposed to criticize. So how many more times will people fall for these blatantly stupid, overtly propagandistic talking points, like where they say, oh, you support this group if you're, criticizing our country or whatever, or you support this extremist insert undesirable thing here. As if there are zero reasons to oppose killing tens of thousands of people, including a lot of children and babies. And on that note, I do have to say, where's all the pro-life talk in that case? That they're really really pro-fetal lives. But when you are born, they'll bomb your ass without a care in the world and demonize anyone who criticizes it. And as I've noted a bunch of different times, if they were really pro the life of the child, they would want some environmental regulations that can prevent birth defects and child deaths and stuff like that. But they don't want to do that. They're hypocrites and they're liars. Okay, so now I'm going to get to something that kind of ties in with this topic, because we're dealing with false allegations about one's character, which can be challenging. And I want to talk about steps you can take to address this situation, whether it's a sort of a political situation or, just happening in your personal life. Although, as they say, the personal can be political. And really, when it comes down to it, when you cut down to the core, a lie is a lie, right? I think they do tend to have political dimensions when they're applying deceit, because, well, look at the example I gave the last time I talked about this. I talked about when I was in high school, some of my classmates were sort of bullying me because I failed to pass a test that was involving the dissection of cats. So they claimed that I did that on purpose so I would have a chance to dissect a cat again. So they were basically lying about me to make me seem like I was Jeffrey Dahmer or whatever. And it's something that I could kind of shrug off more easily now, and maybe I can sort of downplay it. But at the end of the day, that's not really that different from saying, like these protesters are pro-Hamas or whatever. It's actually shockingly similar if you think about the intent and the way that it's done. Just they know it's untrue, but they say it anyway because they wanted to cast me in a negative light. Of course, they don't stop and think that I'm actually the one or I'm talking about them like I am them. They don't stop and think, well, I'm actually the one who's in the negative light here because I'm the one who's lying. They don't stop and think about it that way because their ego insulates them from self-criticism. They want to smear another person. It doesn't matter to them if it's true or not. They'll invent a new reality to sort of circumvent the actual reality. But if you're in a situation where you're being smeared in such a way, it's a good idea to stay calm to the extent possible. It's natural to feel upset or angry when falsely accused, but it's essential to stay calm and composed, again, to the degree that you can. Reacting emotionally can escalate the situation and potentially damage your reputation further. And to some extent, you should try to understand the other side. In some cases, I'll say this, maybe they're not even lying. Maybe it was some misinformation or disinformation and they believe it's true. And in some cases, who knows, maybe they're even right and you're wrong. So definitely try to stay calm and think about the situation. Every situation is going to be a little bit different. And another good idea is to gather evidence. Collect any evidence that supports your innocence. And this could include emails, messages, witness statements, or any other documentation that contradicts the false allegations against you. And that can be important. I know that's what they try to do in a courtroom, but it's also what you can do outside of a courtroom if it's relevant. And in the age of technology, there's often more evidence than there was in the past because you can access records that are kept online, like text messages or anything like that. Basically you can even establish an alibi if it's relevant to whatever their accusation is. Maybe you weren't actually at the place that they're accusing you of being at or whatever. It depends on the context and what sort of lie is being told, but I'm generalizing here. So another thing to do is communicate directly. If possible, address the accuser directly and professionally. It's a good thing to do. Explain your side of the story calmly, again, to the extent that you can, and provide any evidence you have to refute the allegations. So these are things you should do when someone is telling bad things about you behind your back in a group of friends as well as in a political context. I think that both of them have similar characteristics. Dealing with gossip or negative talk behind your back can be tough, especially when it's within a group of friends. Who wants to feel like they're being backstabbed by people that, are in their desired group, whether it's friends or family. So it's one of those things, and I hate it when, people talk about you behind your back and then they pretend like they love you and all that kind of stuff. That can make it both more awkward and more painful. It can just be really weird. So dealing with friends who talk behind your back can be really tough, especially when they try to act like everything is normal, It's understandable to feel hurt and betrayed by their behavior. And you might even want to forget it, the ability to forget becomes a coping mechanism. But sometimes maybe things should be forgotten, but in a lot of cases it's best to not totally forget it. So there are steps you might consider taking, whether it's in person or posts online or whatever. So again, you should address the issue directly. Sometimes the best approach is to have a calm and honest conversation with your friend or your family member or coworker, whatever it is. Let them know how you feel about what you've heard and give them a chance to explain themselves. This also lets you prove your value to them as sort of an honest person. If you if you're open and honest about it and try not to be overly emotional. Communication can often clear up misunderstandings and pave the way for resolving conflicts. So you're going to want to have clarification to reduce conflict as well. It can play a crucial role in reducing the possibility of conflict or an existing one by ensuring your messages are clearly understood and interpreted correctly. And if you want to know how it helps, it can avoid further misunderstandings. Clear communication ensures that all parties involved in the conversation understand each other's perspectives, intentions, and expectations accurately. And, you might want to avoid some destructive questions, like, so you're saying it's my fault? Like, you might want to avoid that kind of language, if possible. It's not always possible. Sometimes it's just going to happen that way when you're talking because your emotions might be heightened. But, try to stay calm and cool. And misunderstandings often arise when messages are vague or ambiguous, leading to conflict. So that's why you want to be clear and specific. By clarifying the communication, you can prevent these misunderstandings from occurring in the first place, at least in some circumstances. If a person is dishonest enough, they're just going to be lying about you, right? And it's a good idea to resolve ambiguities. Sometimes messages can be unclear or open to interpretation. For example, instead of saying "I need this soon," you should say "I need this by Friday." That's like an example that I found online. As an example of being clear in your messaging. And sure enough, there's less room for misinterpretation if you specifically, address them and the issue at hand. You remove ambiguities, you provide additional context, explanations, or examples, and thereby ensure that everyone interprets the message in the same way, or that they at least should interpret the message the same way. So when you remove ambiguity, there's less room for misinterpretation and conflict. I just want to kind of drive that point home to people out there. Another idea is to promote active listening. I've touched upon this before, but clarification encourages active listening, where individuals focus on understanding the speaker's message rather than simply waiting for their turn to speak. So Sabrina Romanoff, a doctor of psychology, explained this on the website Very Well Mind. Active listening requires decentering from one's fixed position to be fully present with another. It helps people feel more understood and strengthens relationships, as it signals a willingness to sit with the other's perspective and empathy for their situation instead of singular focus on oneself. So I'd have a hard time disagreeing with that. That just seems to be true, like a general fact. So when people actively listen and seek clarification when needed, they're better able to grasp the speaker's intended meaning, or the writer's intended meaning, which fosters mutual understanding and reduces the likelihood of conflict. And I realize that it can be tough to do this in certain situations. You kind of have to improvise with whatever you're given. But these are all common tactics you can employ in your daily life, because you know what? There's a chance somebody's lying about you right now. Either it'll be in your personal relationships or the examples I mentioned right at the beginning of this video. Maybe you're part of a political designation that some people don't like, and they'll be smearing you like this. It's roughly the same set of principles that can get you out of it. So another idea is to build trust. Clear communication can build trust among individuals by demonstrating honesty, transparency, and openness. When people communicate clearly and honestly, others are more likely to trust them and their intentions. That's a perfectly reasonable expectation if you are being clear and honest that others will trust you. So, trust is obviously valuable for maintaining healthy relationships, and it helps prevent conflicts from escalating unnecessarily. And there are times where you have to address assumptions. People often make assumptions about what others mean or intend based on their own perspectives and experiences, and that includes being propagandized, as I mentioned earlier. So it's kind of your job, unfortunately, to present the truth. You actually have to kind of plead your case to sometimes defeat other people's false assumptions about you. Again, they might be relatively innocent assumptions, but they could be false anyway. You know, uh, False assumptions can lead to misunderstandings and conflict. Clarification allows individuals to address any assumptions they may have by seeking clarification directly from the other party, thereby minimizing the risk of misinterpretation. And really, that's the name of the game here. You have to get people to stop misinterpreting what is happening, whether it's in your personal relationships or a political debate or discussion. That's sort of the name of the game. If it's not just about controlling the narrative or whatever, it's also about actually telling the truth and making it so that the truth is finally interpreted as the truth. You know, that's one of the tricky things about living in a time of rampant disinformation. It's really an attack on some basic truths and core principles, and in some ways even the premise of having core principles. Because if you've really paid attention to the way the whole political system is going in this country, it's just full of contradictions more than anything else. Like there's still some good things happening in the world, don't get me wrong, but there's definitely a lot of lying, a lot of contradictory things happening. People will say one thing but do another, and the classic example of hypocrisy. And still, one of the best ways you can get out of that, or we can get out of that collectively, is to apply some of these core ideas. And hopefully you can do that. Hopefully I can do that. And we'll have success in actually crafting a better future.